Amidst the desolate ruins of a city under the night sky, the scarred protagonist was astonished to witness a blinding star-shaped light source suddenly appear high above. A whistling sound tore through the night, heralding an unusual event about to unfold. Realizing it was no ordinary star, the protagonist, his body covered in injuries, astonishingly pointed towards the object hurtling straight towards the junkyard of the dead city. Destiny seemed to be guiding that mysterious light to this very place. At the landing site, the protagonist stood stunned, facing the egg, a mysterious, glowing, egg-shaped entity hovering amidst the pile of rubble. Its appearance caused the surrounding space to freeze in extreme tension. The strange object turned out to be a colossal egg with black and white spiral patterns, lying isolated on a sharp rock in the silent night. A big question arose in the observer's mind about its true origin. The protagonist was extremely bewildered to see that the fallen object not only shook violently but also emitted a groaning sound like a living creature. He couldn't believe his eyes, witnessing an egg display such vivid signs of life. Surprisingly, the egg trembled from the cold and let out a fearful whimper, making the protagonist exclaim in terror. Immediately after, the entity turned to call him Child of Humanity in a commanding tone. Declaring its life force was dwindling, the egg shamelessly demanded the protagonist embrace and caress it to warm it up. This peculiar request left the protagonist feeling both disgusted and awkward. Though reluctant, the protagonist held the strange creature tightly, enduring the wounds on his body. Meanwhile, a pair of mysterious armored hands reached out from the shadows, as if awaiting a pact. The moment the protagonist touched it, the egg trembled violently and secreted a strange liquid, joyfully exclaiming that its cells were regenerating thanks to his warmth. This intense reaction left the protagonist both confused and concerned. Feeling the warmth spreading after the cold of the sacred land, the egg expressed deep gratitude to the protagonist for saving it. The protagonist was astonished to hear Gandala mentioned, the land of the gods. The protagonist emotionally embraced the small, glowing ornament, tears welling up as he uttered sincere thanks. It had been too long since he had received such kindness or a meaningful gift. The story rewinds 20 years, to a desolate world where gratitude seemed to have long gone extinct. The crumbling ruins stood tall as witnesses to a dark era. The narration reveals the tragedy when the human kingdom was invaded and devastated by mighty Drakarch from Gandala. The pitch-black sky was obscured by the grotesque forms of the invading monster army. Civilization collapsed, and the survivors were forced to huddle in small villages at the foot of colossal organic structures. They lived in extreme fear of the monsters devouring their kin right before their eyes. Humanity was enslaved to serve the Drakarch, forced into hard labor, cleaning amidst the horrifying feasts of the monsters. The image of the old slave carrying a bucket of scraps illustrated the utter misery of their tormented existence. Standing before the great Lord Abralam, the human leader humbly offered absolute loyalty and accepted their status as property in exchange for their lives. Such abject humility was met with the cruel arrogance of the ruler. In contrast to the old man's extreme, screaming rage, the protagonist and the other men stood silently, observing. Their calm, almost cold expressions concealed unpredictable calculations. The tense silence was broken when a loud voice bellowed, "Fools!" aimed directly at the group facing him. The mysterious long-haired man stood with his back to them, exuding an overwhelming aura that made everyone wary. The bald-headed jailer angrily punched the protagonist, who was called Gonron, in the face and severely reprimanded him for sloppy cleaning. He emphasized that a negligent slave was unforgivable in the presence of the Lord. A burly man stood before the crowd, eloquently declared that their lives were a grace bestowed by the Drakarch. He forced everyone to accept their inferior status under the surveillance of emotionless machines. In the darkness, the scarred protagonist clutched a small knife, his eyes showing extreme vigilance. Beside him, the zipper creature spoke reassuringly, forming a strange alliance between the two species. The zipper creature, with dozens of menacing eyes, forced its opponent to admit their inferiority, even more so than vermin. It arrogantly demanded gratitude for bestowing purpose upon their meaningless lives. The brutal guardian yelled and fiercely struck the protagonist, the impact so strong it cracked the ground. The protagonist could only grit his teeth and endure the unreasonable fury of his superior. The zipper creature sarcastically offered a false promise of freedom to the exhausted prisoners, including the guardian who had just tormented others. Its sinister smile indicated this freedom came at a steep price. Despite knowing Abralam's cruelty towards those who fled, the protagonist still trembled as he rose in the darkness. He recalled his compatriots who had been devoured but refused to let fear drown his will to resist. Called out and insulted by the monster zipper creature, the protagonist still held his head high, declaring he would never surrender. That unyielding attitude made the enemy both extremely enraged and strangely amused. From within the grotesque mushroom-shaped structure, a cold voice ordered the worker to be beaten until his cries pleased the master. The cruel command echoed amidst the desolate ruins. Stepping out of the shadows with a scarred bare back, the protagonist announced his return in a calm, steady tone. The black-haired girl below couldn't hide her astonishment, bursting out Gonron's name. As soon as the protagonist caught it, the sentient egg loudly reproached him for abandoning it for too long. It continuously demanded atonement from its discoverer, despite the protagonist's bewildered expression. The protagonist teased the round object by tickling it with mechanical arms, chuckling with amusement, seeing it still showed no signs of hatching after a month. This rare moment of joy eased the usual tense atmosphere. The protagonist happily enjoyed a dish of demon beetle legs, a food source domesticated from hell for slaves, with surprising optimism. He casually explained the origin of this gruesome dish as if it were a delicacy. Ignoring the warning about having his life force drained, the protagonist enthusiastically invited the egg to eat and recharge. His carefree attitude left the small creature helpless. Immediately, the protagonist cried out in pain as the egg began to glow brightly and drain his life force, just as it had warned. His body trembled as his energy was being taken. After recovering, the egg promised to repay everything it had taken from Ohma in the future. It also confirmed its origin from the earthly hell of Gandala with a thoughtful expression. The egg began to tell of the king who ruled all of Drakarch in Gandala, the great father who had brought it into existence. The majestic image of the king appeared against the starry night sky through its proud narration. Tragedy struck when that king was usurped and beheaded by Agito, breaking the long-standing peace treaty. The egg explained that this event paved the way for Drakarch's bloody invasion of the human world. The protagonist laughed heartily at the egg's escape story, but then unexpectedly changed his demeanor when he heard the other party affirm the truth. He was stunned as the egg held up a token, declaring itself the legitimate heir of King Drakarch. The protagonist pondered the possibilities if that claim of royal lineage was true. A new plan seemed to be forming in the man's mind. The protagonist smiled contentedly, realizing he had now become a friend to a prince. It was an unexpected honor, kindling a glimmer of hope amidst this desolate ruin. But the joy was short-lived. The protagonist sank into sadness, remembering his solitude and lost loved ones. Tears streamed down his face as painful memories flooded back amidst the harsh reality. Zipper creature, bored with its usual menu, decided to change things up by tightening its grip on its small minion. It yearned for the unfamiliar taste of mortal flesh, even if it smelled of insects. Zipper creature threatened to send Gonron to hunt down the wild humans in the area. And if he failed, he himself would become its next meal, to be slowly consumed within its depths. The old monster zipper creature reveled in breaking the protagonist's resilient will, while the nearby jailer mockingly laughed along. The physical suffering of the enslaved became entertainment for those in power. The cruel demons competed to terrorize the young prisoner's mind with savage words. They gloated, recounting the demise of the child's parents and threatening a horrifying reunion within their depths. The colossal serpentine entity zipper creature continued to threaten the protagonist, describing his parents as foolish and weak. The venomous words aimed to provoke and dampen the young warrior's will to resist. Even as the protagonist writhed in agony within its tightening grasp, The monster zipper creature threw its head back and cackled triumphantly. Its cruelty was evident in its joy at tormenting others. The protagonist vomited profusely, disgusted by what he had just been forced to swallow, while Zipper Creature regarded it as an amusing joke. This humiliation only intensified the hatred in the captive's eyes. A tense atmosphere enveloped them as the leader of the muscular group declared defiantly, "You will laugh," facing Zipper Creature's watchful gaze. A rumbling echo signaled the imminent start of a mental torment. Laughter echoed from the colossal structure above, forcing the protagonist to laugh in agony under the mocking gaze of the muscular minions. A tragicomic sight, as laughter became a tool of torment. Amidst the desolate ruins, the protagonist was desperate yet clinging to life. He told himself he couldn't perish yet, for there was still an important mission to complete. Recalling his sister, who had been taken by Drakarch, the protagonist rekindled the flame of determination in his tear-filled eyes. He vowed to find a way out of this hell to rescue the only remaining family member in the world. The protagonist anxiously observed an energetic girl cheerfully leading a flock of small, round creatures under the night sky. Her innocence sharply contrasted with the anxiety clearly visible on her face. The egg declared it would add restoring world peace to its quest to reclaim the throne. This bold declaration left the protagonist beside it, astonished by his companion's grand ambition. The egg unexpectedly vowed vengeance against King Agito, leaving the protagonist, who was holding it, both shocked and frightened. But then, he quickly regained his confidence, asserting his determination to reclaim what was rightfully his. The egg solemnly declared that its oldest acquaintance would be permitted to sit beside it when it ruled the world. It was a tremendous honor that left the other party deeply grateful and ready to serve. The protagonist pondered the future of humanity and the possibility of a better life. He resolved to protect the small object he held, seeing it as a final hope for this world. Under the sunset blanketing the dead city, the protagonist struggled to his feet from the rubble, weapon gripped tightly. He was ready to confront the enemy waiting in the corridor ahead in a life-or-death battle. While a fierce battle with the Zipper Creature raged in another dimension, the protagonist was engrossed in reading by candlelight. He savored a rare moment of peace with his small companion amidst the ruined world. Despite the wounds on his body and the pain from contact with the strange object, the protagonist smiled happily under the starry sky. He held his peculiar companion tightly, finding joy in that connection. From behind the ruined wall, the creepy old man smirked as he observed the entire settlement. His eyes held dark schemes, poised to descend upon the survivors. Under the star-filled night sky, the protagonist stared ahead with a serious expression, the scar on his face seeming to hint at a painful past. Meanwhile, a giant guardian hand cradled a glowing orb, closely guarded by muscular sentinels, suggesting an important secret was being concealed. The protagonist recalled a scene where the bald boss and his cronies were gleefully assaulting the small protagonist. However, they suddenly stopped when they noticed a strange, resilient light shining in the boy's eyes, despite his body being covered in injuries. At the palace, a powerful guardian on the throne angrily accused a subordinate of harboring an enemy, revealing internal divisions. To his surprise, the protagonist realized the object he held was a Drakarch's egg and pleaded with the long-haired guardian to leave it be. Despite his severely injured body, the protagonist knelt, begging his captors to do as they pleased with him, but to spare the egg. At that moment, the protagonist, though battered and bruised, boldly declared his friendship, making the old guardian snort in disdain. The guardian mocked Gonron, who seemed to be talking to thin air, sarcastically remarking that his denial of reality had reached the point of hearing voices. Meanwhile, another guardian turned to ask Lord Zipper Creature for his opinion on how to deal with this traitor. The colossal Zipper Creature expressed extreme disappointment, declaring he was tired of this plaything and ordered Gonron to be carved up for the livestock. Immediately, the executioner raised his blade, filling Gonron with utter horror as the blade neared his neck. As the guardian was scoffing, the egg-shaped object in his comrade's hand suddenly vibrated violently and cracked open. Unexpectedly, it exploded and shot away, startling the guardian holding it, causing him pain and panic. Chaos ensued as a large, fractured orb floated in the air, astonishing Zipper Creature and the guardians. While the bewildered kidnapper guardian still held the protagonist tightly, a smaller orb fell to the ground with a sharp clatter, signaling an unexpected turn of events. Witnessing the scene before him, the egg was filled with utter horror and anguish. He stared at the cracking, trembling Gonron, blaming himself and uttering a regretful apology for allowing this to happen. The old guardian couldn't hide his astonishment when he realized the two could actually communicate. Immediately after, the guardian commander challenged Gonron to perish with dignity for his friend, while the executioners were ready to act. The injured guardian tried to prevent Gonron's execution, while the protagonist painfully reassured his friend. However, Abralam declared that Ohma still held exploitable value, causing the guardian to immediately beg to die in his place to protect him. The scarred protagonist bid a painful farewell to Ohma, while Zipper Creature proudly declared he would personally nurture the egg into a great warrior. However, the protagonist unexpectedly retorted, and immediately, the egg-like object exploded violently, shattering the monster's plans. Witnessing Gonron's colossal body crumbling and disintegrating into pieces, the long-haired egg cried out in despair. He painfully begged his friend not to perish, but Gonron's collapse seemed irreversible. Lying on the shattered ground, his face covered in cracks, the egg whispered that Gonron was his first friend. Through a circular view, his eyes were heavy with sorrow as he called out the name of his fading friend. The muscular guardian stood triumphantly over the motionless protagonist, signaling his comrades nearby. Meanwhile, Zipper Creature observed the scene with clear relish, his mouth watering in anticipation of the next moment. The tentacled guardian loudly declared he would savor the rare delicacy, the egg of his own kind. While the egg mourned a senseless demise, the protagonist lay on the ground, his face bruised, feeling utterly pathetic and pitiful. The egg expressed happiness that its friend's face was the first thing it saw, but a mysterious, resolute voice vowed not to let it perish. Immediately, a colossal surge of dark energy erupted from the orb, creating a violent shockwave. A thick cloud of black smoke suddenly rose, engulfing the egg, confusing the smaller guardians nearby. The injured egg cried out Gonron's name, while Zipper Creature quickly realized this was a special defense mechanism to protect the vulnerable host. In the darkness, the egg reminded its friend of their vow of protection and their friendship. It emphasized that to achieve this, they would have to be ready to conquer an entire world overrun by the Drakarchs. Despite his body being covered in grotesque bony structures, the protagonist maintained his resilient will. He grimaced through the pain of the transformation and cried out with determination, ready to face the challenge. The protagonist charged forward with incredible speed, his face a mix of panic and fierce resolve. Organic tentacles erupted around him, creating a chaotic and dramatic spectacle. The shadow monster was astonished to see the blazing holy artifact revive someone on the brink of demise, while the Zipper Creature beside it watched contemplatively. The atmosphere grew tense as an exquisite dagger was drawn, signaling a decisive action was about to unfold. The protagonist, clad in fiery red spiked armor, stood majestically, wielding a colossal monster skull sword. On his back, the one-eyed Zipper Creature clung tightly, both exuding a fierce aura, ready for a brutal conflict. As the protagonist gazed forward with icy eyes, the bald-headed guards were utterly panicked, realizing Gonron had been brought back to life by the egg. A long-haired guard tried to reassure himself that the adversary could not compare to Lord Abralam, but his body still trembled uncontrollably with fear. The colossal Zipper Creature initially showed surprise but quickly regained its arrogant demeanor, declaring that a mere slave could not be a threat to it. It stood towering, gazing disdainfully at the protagonist, who was enveloped in a surge of blazing energy. The Zipper Creature roared in fury as its attack was evaded. Its colossal tentacles lashed violently through the air, creating piercing shrieks. In the distance, the night guard moved swiftly to dodge, resulting in a powerful, explosive impact. The Zipper Creature's dense tentacles were severed repeatedly in a flurry of unseen, lightning-fast strikes. Black blood and tentacle fragments splattered everywhere, accompanied by continuous slicing sounds. The zipper creature's jaw dropped in astonishment, witnessing the red-haired protagonist fiercely battling amidst the smaller creatures. With a face full of rage and determination, the protagonist unleashed a thunderous strike that violently shook the ground. A colossal tentacle suddenly exploded in mid-air, causing the zipper creature to gape in terrified shock. In contrast, the protagonist stood confidently nearby, calmly observing and affirmed that he had foreseen this outcome. The invisible adversary threatened the protagonist that he would perish after just one more strike, then unleashed a devastating technique. The protagonist cried out in anguish as the attack landed, leaving wounds on his face. The red-haired protagonist surged forward with terrifying speed, unleashing the ultimate technique, destructive lightning, aimed directly at the zipper creature. The colossal monster was struck by the sudden blow, only managing a single cry before the overwhelming power. The zipper creature roared frantically, unable to believe that someone once as weak as Gonron could resist so powerfully. The monster stood stunned, reeling from the sudden surge of power, and regretfully muttered that peace might still have been possible. The zipper creature retreated in panic, stammering denials of the reality unfolding before its eyes. Facing it, the protagonist coldly pronounced a sentence of doom, affirming that demise had firmly grasped the adversary. As the protagonist watched in astonishment as the zipper creature writhed and shrieked in agony, the egg calmly explained about the toxic gas enveloping the monster. It revealed that this was a special ability of its own, creating a highly potent, noxious gas that countered the Drakarch species. The adversary, now pathetic with a blood-soaked arm, desperately pleaded with Gonron for his life. He tried to evoke past sentiments, shamelessly claiming to have once nurtured Gonron like a father, hoping to find a way to survive. The protagonist looked down at the dark, viscous pool that was once Aberlum with disdain, mocking his pathetic end. He coldly affirmed that everything was over and there was no longer any chance of redemption for the defeated foe. The protagonist commanded the malevolent Drakarch spirit to rest, but the shadowy entity shrieked in terror, unwilling to dissipate. The narrative unexpectedly shifted as a stream of memories transported viewers back to 20 years prior. The scene plunged into abstract chaos, with grotesque forms, swirling clouds resembling monster heads, and intertwined skeletal structures. A colossal clawed hand reached out from the void, creating a haunting and terrifying tableau. A narration echoed, revealing that the king's demise had plunged both the Drakarch tribe and the human kingdom into anarchy. Panic spread everywhere as citizens and soldiers fled at the news that Lord Aberlum had been overcome by a monster. In that desperate situation, tragedy was further compounded as the king's sole successor was merely an immature prince. After praising Gonron's success, the mechanical egg issued a serious warning about the arduous journey ahead. It emphasized that they would face powerful foes, strong enough to overcome even the previous king. The egg solemnly swore to stand by its friend until the day he hatched from the egg and became the savior king of humanity. The armored protagonist silently accepted the oath, understanding the price to be paid to make it a reality. The egg revealed its 10-year hatching plan, leaving the protagonist utterly astonished. However, he quickly regained his composure, determined to defeat King Drakarch Agito to pave the way for the prince's journey to reclaim the throne. Standing amidst the ruins, the protagonist couldn't hide his surprise at how easily the terrifying zipper creature had been defeated. The egg explained that the orb the protagonist had just consumed was the heart, brimming with the life essence of a Drakarch. As he felt his body undergoing strange transformations, the creature urged him to hunt and consume more to fuel its hatching process. Understanding the need for life energy to nourish his ally, the protagonist confirmed his mission to hunt down and vanquish the Drakarch species. With a determined smile, he raised the glowing object, asserting that they must grow stronger if they wished to overthrow the king. The egg declared the protagonist worthy of becoming its vassal and reassured him not to be afraid. The protagonist accepted his new role, ready to face the challenges awaiting him in this desolate world. The ruined city came alive in a terrifying way with the cracking sounds of collapsing structures and the echoes of chewing and swallowing from the debris. Nature and unseen creatures were gradually encroaching and consuming what remained of civilization. The protagonist devoured the colossal piece of meat, his face a mix of astonishment and extreme satisfaction. He chewed and swallowed ravenously, as if making up for days of hunger, heedless of the food scattering everywhere. As he ate, the protagonist emotionally shared that his life as a slave had never allowed him to enjoy such a delicious meat meal. The egg gently advised him to eat slowly and savor it. The egg suddenly became excited as it sensed a delicious life force nearby. Though it admitted it couldn't compare to a Drakarch's heart, the creature still showed immense craving for the newly discovered energy source. While the protagonist was engrossed in enjoying what he considered an ideal meal, the egg began to recount the past. It reminisced about a time of peace under its father's rule, before the usurper paved the way for the Drakarch invasion. The egg painted a vision of a bright future, where peace would be restored and a just society built. It eloquently described how children would receive education and food would be so abundant that no one would have to scavenge for sustenance anymore. The protagonist, astonished, asked if such a paradise could truly become a reality. Upon receiving the egg's oath of honor, his eyes gleamed with faith and determination, ready to commit himself to that noble ideal. The protagonist proposed their next destination as the Wild Meat Fortress, much to the egg's surprise. He explained that it was the largest Drakarch community in the region, a perilous yet promising target. When the egg mentioned the name Iris and affirmed that he was kin, the protagonist hesitated with reluctance. Finally, it had to nod, acknowledging the important role of women, though its attitude still held a touch of haughtiness. Amidst laughter from being tickled, the girl loudly warned everyone not to harbor ill intentions towards her sister, who carried royal blood. Suddenly, the protagonist stopped laughing, his ear twitching slightly as he caught a mysterious voice echoing from afar. A storm descended, engulfing the ruined city, and the rumbling thunder startled the protagonist, making him clutch the object in his hand tightly. On the other side, the girl stood on a precarious high platform, her anxious gaze fixed on the sheet of white rain covering the desolate world. A colossal divine entity smiled cryptically, inviting the crowd below to learn from the spectacle before them. On a high pedestal, a young girl, shackled at the feet, stood silently beside a dragonic creature, becoming the focal point of judgment. The colossal deity recounted the tale of young Ulta, who dared to pilfer the offerings presented to it. It scoffed at the boy's reason, a final meal for his gravely ill sister, deeming it a ridiculous excuse for such a sacrilegious act. Amidst the ruins, the old monster scornfully dismissed humans as pathetic and foolish creatures. He turned to Ulta, coldly recounting how, thanks to someone's wicked act, his sister no longer had to perish from illness, concluding his tale with a savage, gleeful laugh. When the cruel, beaked creature revealed that her sister's form had been quite delectable, the blonde girl was utterly stunned but then suppressed her anguish to force a twisted smile. In the pouring rain, she tremblingly told Lord Beamtail that she was very happy, as it had been her sister's final wish. Beamtail appeared disgusted by the long-haired girl's resignation, sarcastically remarking that her mocking of others' demise and her own pathetic fate made him lose all interest in tormenting her. Disappointed at finding no defiance from the human, he departed, leaving behind a gust of wind-ripping energy. As the girl screamed in despair, free-falling from the tall building, the bird-headed monster merely watched with cold amusement. He sneered at the brutal spectacle, savoring the sounds of the city's destruction merging with the tragic cries of the victims. An ear-splitting shriek rang out, signaling a fierce battle between the chainsaw warrior and a colossal white divine beast, witnessed by the villagers. Meanwhile, in a hidden corner, the spiked man, holding the blonde girl tightly, suddenly looked up, startled and surprised by the unexpected events unfolding above. Amidst the crowd's utter confusion, Ohma the egg solicitously asked the blonde girl if she was injured. Seeing this, the protagonist quickly reassured everyone that Ohma was a friendly Drakarch and would harm no one, leaving the flat-headed man nearby stunned and skeptical. The egg proudly declared that its recent act of rescue was merely the duty of a respectable Drakarch. Thus no repayment was necessary. Meanwhile, the long-haired girl confusedly wondered why she had been saved. The blonde girl was profoundly dismayed, drenched in sweat as she realized the harsh reality, contrary to her expectations. She clenched her fists, agonizingly exclaiming that she had thought she was finally about to find eternal peace. While the girl confessed that her life should have ended as commanded, the one-eyed egg angrily questioned Ulta. It roared menacingly, wondering why she wasn't enraged by her sister's demise and suspecting her of intending to defy orders. Faced with the overwhelming power of Lord Beamtail, who held the blonde girl captive, the girl tremblingly bowed in submission. He fearfully swore that he would never dare to dream of defying that great lord amidst the desolate and stormy landscape. Witnessing the girl kneel prostrate, praising the Drakarch's rule, the egg was stunned and enraged. It painfully realized how tragically crushed humanity's spirit had become since its father's passing. The protagonist gravely proposed that the colossal monster cooperate to re-establish the former king's peace and build equality. However, as soon as it heard mention of former king and peace, the monster reacted violently, gnashing its teeth in furious suspicion. The two-faced monster roared in fury, feeling profoundly humiliated by the prospect of returning to an era where it was treated as an equal to humans, those it considered scum. The protagonist was utterly indignant at a decaying world where he couldn't hate the enemy who had eliminated his family, and vehemently opposed returning to old policies. When mocked by the bright-haired girl, he summoned a shadow entity, his eyes blazing with determination to enter a life-or-death battle. While the girl burst into insane, deranged laughter, the protagonist stared coldly at her. With the hideous monster lurking behind him, he declared firmly that his opponent would soon no longer have the chance to mock herself. Amidst a torrential rain of blood, the monster tried to utter its final words, but was powerless as it was relentlessly attacked on the head. From the shadows, a cold voice affirmed that this brutal end was a fitting price for it to pay. The protagonist launched a decisive attack, his chainsaw blade and greatsword tearing through the monster's form, sending blood splattering. That brutal spectacle and overwhelming power made the crowd of onlookers below gape in horror. A terrifying invisible force suddenly tore the monster's body into pieces, from its claws to its head and torso. In extreme agony and bewilderment at what was happening, it screamed in despair before the stunned gaze of the witnesses. The protagonist charged forward with wind-ripping speed, his face set with fierce determination as he unleashed a lightning-fast attack. His opponent, the rough-skinned monster, could only groan in pain as it endured the overwhelming power from the young warrior. In his transformed state, covered in bone armor, the protagonist looked up in astonishment. Before him was a colossal, three-eyed mystical entity exuding a suffocating pressure, making the surrounding air seem to freeze. Under the pouring rain, the monster writhed in agony, desperately pleading with its master and mentioning the former king. However, before its pleas could finish, a sharp blade flashed down, ending its life in an instant. Without hesitation, the male lead swung his sword, slicing the monster in half with a clean strike. In its final moments, the monster could only utter a belated apology to its lord before collapsing completely. Just as the mysterious man ignited hope for a day when humans could live with their heads held high, a cruel reality descended. The blonde girl and the crowd of civilians screamed in utter panic. The male lead clutched the mysterious object tightly, gravely warning the long-haired girl that death would rob her of the chance to see this important thing. Afterward, she lowered her head, her voice softening with remorse as she mentioned the tragedy that had befallen her friend's sister. Amidst the desolate ruins, the curly-haired girl burst into heart-wrenching sobs, clutching her head in extreme pain. Seeing this, the male lead quickly knelt, gently stroking and comforting the girl under the sympathetic gaze of those around them. Unable to suppress his emotions any longer, the male lead let out a heart-rending scream. His wide, staring eyes and scarred face revealed a mixture of bone-deep anguish and seething rage. Amidst the desolate and ruined world, two mysterious beings boldly declared their mission to become beacons of hope. One cradled a glowing heart in their hands, asserting that this was the crucial key for humanity to reclaim its world. Standing amidst the city's ruins, the male lead calmly brought the peculiar eye-shaped object to his mouth. He took a crisp bite, chewing it with a serene expression as if it were the most ordinary snack in the world. The male lead climbed the precarious cliff, surprised to find he wasn't tired despite having traversed the ruins of two cities. He mused that this extraordinary stamina was likely a side effect of consuming the Drakarchs' heart, then suddenly paused when he saw something ahead. Amidst the dense forest, the male lead couldn't hide his extreme astonishment upon discovering a waterfall. Gonron stood silently before the majestic scene of the waterfall valley intertwined with ruined buildings. From behind, the male lead's voice broke the silence, asking if he intended to bathe amidst this pristine wilderness. The male lead nervously sniffed himself when the egg bluntly criticized him. The hovering eye-object beside him mercilessly asserted that he reeked strongly, no different from the remains of a monster. Immersed in the cool water, the male lead was stunned as he examined his body. He couldn't believe his eyes when he realized the intricate wounds from the previous fierce battle had completely vanished without a trace. The male lead stood gazing at the sky, distinctly feeling the extraordinary transformation within his body. His eyesight was now so sharp that he could precisely count every bird in the flock soaring at a great distance. Amidst the silent space, the male lead's senses became sharper than ever. He listened to every minute movement of nature, from the birds on the branches, the snakes slithering on the ground, to the mysterious object submerged deep beneath the water. All appeared vividly in his perception. The male lead covered his ears, initially in bewilderment, then transitioning to extreme excitement as he realized his hearing had also evolved. He let out a hearty laugh, delighted that he could now clearly hear voices from a great distance. The male lead winced at a headache, his acute hearing helping him detect the footsteps of 3 human children. Meanwhile, the group of children was stealthily entering the forbidden forest, and despite some fear, they reassured each other to keep their journey an absolute secret. The male lead squinted, observing ahead where the forest was pitch black, with deep tree hollows seemingly oozing strange fluids. He immediately became wary, concluding that the approaching danger originated from that ominous forest. A tense argument erupted as the children insisted on entering the forest to forage for food to save their camp from starvation. However, the other children were extremely worried, as that forest was the territory of extremely dangerous demon bugs. The desolate space suddenly became eerie with strange sounds echoing everywhere. Rumbling vibrations mingled with creaking noises emanating from peculiar spiral plants, signaling an ominous presence. Nam Chin strained his ears, listening to a large, squirming sound on the move, and was horrified to realize it was charging straight for the children. He confirmed it was the legendary demon beetle, and immediately, the monster emerged from the water, firing lethal energy beams. Nam Chin clutched Ohma tightly, shooting off like an arrow across the wilderness to respond to the urgent situation. Seeing the people in danger, he decided that, instead of just warning them, he had to eradicate the lurking shadow monster completely to ensure their absolute safety. Facing the colossal scorpion monster, which roared ferociously and pointed its sharp tail towards him, Nam Chin stood firm as a rock. His muscles bulging and tensed, he held the object tightly in his hand, his eyes burning with unwavering determination. Terrified by the unprecedented colossal size of the demon beetle, Nam Chin desperately pleaded with Ohma for power. However, Ohma coldly refused, reminding him that he had already consumed 2 Drakarch hearts and could not receive any more power. The egg, using its single eye, authoritatively commanded its subordinate. It demanded that the opponent be crushed to prove himself worthy of standing beside the future King Draka, considering the monster a mere insignificant insect. Nam Chin exclaimed in disgust, viewing the situation as a sick joke as he faced the scorpion monster. He swiftly leapt up to evade the lethal thrust from its sharp tail, which plunged into the ground, leaving a terrifying aftershock. Sweat mingled with dust, Nam Chin gritted his teeth in anger at the dire situation. He muttered a curse, realizing there was no retreat, and he was forced to find a way to defeat this monster with his own strength. Nam Chin delivered a thunderous kick, shattering the hard shell of the scorpion monster, which made him briefly wonder if his opponent was too weak. But very quickly, he realized he had become remarkably stronger, and with surging confidence, he charged forward, continuing to attack the monster, which was hissing in pain. Struck down painfully by the demon beetle, Nam Chin still struggled back up, fighting fiercely. In the midst of battle, he turned to anxiously ask about the group of children nearby, but his concern was met with the children's expressions of extreme terror at an approaching threat. Nam Chin, covered in blood and nearly naked, frantically pointed towards the pervert he saw. He tried to call out to the 3 children who were running away and crying out for their mother, utterly terrified by the appearance of the 2 reluctant heroes. Amidst the desolate landscape covered in snow dust, Nam Chin stood dumbfounded as he heard a hearty laugh echoing from the void. The mysterious voice offered sincere thanks for his intervention to save their children. The camp residents were overjoyed, gathering around Gonron to express their gratitude for his elimination of the scorpion, which allowed them to safely venture into the forest. Meanwhile, Ohma cleverly disguised himself as a round sculpture to secretly observe without causing panic. Before a colossal plate of food prepared from scorpion meat, Nam Chin couldn't hide his craving. His mouth agape, drooling profusely, his eyes gleamed with excitement at this unexpected feast. The bearded man resolutely declared that he would make full use of every part of the monster, not wasting a single piece. Contrary to that enthusiasm, Nam Chin, while stuffing food into his mouth, looked nauseated, struggling to swallow each strange piece of meat. While the old blacksmith enthusiastically outlined plans to craft weapons and armor from the scorpion shell, Nam Chin was using his bare hands to process the material. He strained to break off pieces of the rock-hard shell, creating ear-splitting cracking sounds that astonished everyone. A startled voice exclaimed, unable to believe Nam Chin had eaten even the rock-hard claw, and questioned if he was even human. In response to their astonishment, he calmly remarked that everyone here was so lively because they didn't live under Drakarchs' rule. The bearded man reminisced about their arduous past, when their people were once slaves and had sacrificed everything to escape Drakarch. Nam Chin listened silently, his eyes filled with sadness and contemplation, as he understood the steep price they paid for their freedom today. Upon hearing Ohma affirm that there were still people living with pride, Nam Chin couldn't help but be moved, as he had only ever witnessed souls crushed by Drakarch. He bowed his head, sincerely thanking Ohma for helping him realize this beautiful aspect of humanity he had never known. The bearded man enthusiastically introduced his daughter, who was almost 15, to Gonron. He didn't hesitate to suggest he stay at the camp and even hinted at starting a new family, leaving the girl standing beside him to only stand silently, embarrassed. Hearing the marriage proposal for Gonron, Nam Chin reacted violently as if electrocuted. He shouted a refusal on her behalf, frantically waving his hands, protesting the idea of starting a family, though deep down he had to admit the girl was indeed very cute. The egg, with its powerful giant eye, angrily warned its opponent not to abandon their destiny of world domination for a mere girl. It firmly asserted that their fate was to stand alongside it and rule this world. To the utter astonishment of the male lead and the bearded man, the egg unexpectedly spoke, utterly bewildering them and making them wonder if it was truly alive. Ohma immediately pretended to be an immobile statue to conceal his identity from their suspicious gazes. The atmosphere grew tense as the bearded man panicked, realizing it might be Drakarchs' egg. The male lead awkwardly raised his hands, trying to find a reasonable explanation for this ironic situation amidst the horror of those around them. Fury erupted as the crowd, led by the goateed man, roared, demanding Drakarchs' immediate demise. Fear and hatred consumed them, turning into savage shouts calling for the creature's life to be taken. Wandering amidst the desolate ruins, the male lead was stunned to learn of the immediate execution for anything related to Drakarch. He stumbled, silently lamenting the intense hatred the world harbored for that species. The male lead anxiously expressed to Prince Ohma that convincing humanity to trust him as an ally would be far from easy. However, Prince Ohma maintained a proudly optimistic attitude, believing that one day all of humanity would welcome his reign. Under the star-filled night sky in a pristine land, the male lead smiled radiantly, clutching the cracked egg-shaped object in his hands. The scene exuded a rare sense of peace amidst an arduous journey. Amidst the smoke-filled desolation, the egg revealed shocking information received from Gandala. A major event seemed to be quietly unfolding behind these ruins. Scene change. A colossal shadow monster appeared above the crowd in the ruined city, spreading terror as it declared that the former king's offspring had escaped to the human realm. The villagers trembled upon hearing that the enemy vying for the throne had eliminated countless Drakarchs. At that moment, tragedy struck as a small victim was seized by a monstrous hand and torn apart amidst heart-wrenching screams. The ruthless shadow entity tightened its grip on the victim, mocking the prey's extreme agony. More disgustingly, a commoner below cheered excitedly, viewing this savage spectacle as a perfect opportunity to prove loyalty to the king. The girl was drained dry by the monster, leaving only a husk. A giant muscular monster with a bizarre head structure aggressively declared it would utterly eradicate the former king's descendants, signaling a dangerous new threat drawing near. Standing amidst the desolate ruins, the girl was stunned to discover a group of Drakarchs' henchmen approaching. Anxiety was clear on her face as she realized she was surrounded by dangerous adversaries. Monsters with jagged teeth appeared, menacingly cackling, terrifying the girl. She cried out in fear, realizing the danger engulfing her from all sides. The male lead cowered, covering his face in extreme fear, while the knife-wielding monster standing beside him looked on with curiosity, seemingly not understanding why its prey reacted in such a way. A horrifying scene unfolded as the stitched-head monster brutally tore, black blood gushing everywhere, leaving the victim wide-eyed in despair. After the battle, the male lead realized that the defeated creatures completely lacked hearts. The monster explained that they were merely soulless constructs created by Drakarch, leaving the male lead utterly bewildered. The egg meticulously explained that these warriors were actually extensions created from Drakarch's own blood and energy. Hearing this, the girl and the male lead immediately became vigilant, ready to confront the true threat behind it all. Without hesitation, the girl fiercely swung her sword, aiming directly at the male lead. Attacked unexpectedly, the male lead could only raise his arm to block the blow in utter astonishment and terror. The girl shouted angrily, accusing the opponent of being Drakarch's minion. The male lead continuously dodged attacks, astonishing the girl. In a desperate moment, the male lead bit down on the blade, his face contorted in agony. Witnessing that insane sight, the girl could only cry out in horror, trying to stop him, but it was too late. Amidst the ruins, the male lead shouted in panic upon seeing Gonron appear, thinking it was a monster. Despite the girl also being terrified by the talking egg, Gonron calmly reassured them that he was actually human. The girl painfully recounted her tragic past, when her village was attacked by Drakarch Shurilia, and its people were taken to be consumed. The male lead listened to the story, gently asking if any of her loved ones had become victims. The girl choked up, admitting that the woman wasn't her birth mother, but had taken her in when she was abandoned. Her confession held deep gratitude mixed with tormenting sorrow. Makia was horrified to realize that their presence had put everyone in danger, as Ohma was being relentlessly pursued. She blamed herself, knowing the enemy was hunting for the prince who had fallen to earth. The male lead called out Makia's name loudly, acknowledging her as a rebellious warrior, just like his own group, for daring to defy the Drakarchs. However, he suggested Makia let them handle this dangerous situation. The girl adamantly refused to trust the one nurturing the Drakarch egg, while the male lead scoffed mockingly at her hatred. Eventually, the girl agreed to use the opponent for her own purposes, though her heart remained full of doubt. Amidst the desolate landscape, the girl explained the situation and decided to take in the newcomer as bait. He decisively gestured for everyone to follow him, despite the dangers lurking ahead. A greedy mummy creature fantasized about capturing the prince to prove its worth to the king and join the Drakarch trio. Meanwhile, the villagers could only watch the desolate scene with heavy anxiety. The colossal monster queen sat amidst the ruins, panting with ambition as she declared she would consolidate her power and expand her army. Around her, hideous minion creatures began to stir, moving according to their master's will. From above, the hideous monster's gaze swept over the tiny figures below, considering who to choose for its next meal. Finally, it extended its claw towards its chosen prey with savage hunger. Amidst the desolate, ruined buildings, the woman held two children tightly, her face showing extreme anxiety. They huddled close, trying to find a fragile bit of safety in this perilous world. Facing the colossal winged entity, the girl shouted angrily, asserting she would never beg for her life. The defiance in her eyes surprised and amused the monster. While the monster was cruelly toying with its prey, the woman sadly accepted her tragic fate. She silently conveyed her last words to Makia, wishing the child would grow up strong. The alien overlord stood amidst the ruined city, arrogantly mocking humanity's pride and declaring them mere beasts. He threatened brutal punishment through flaying and impalement, asserting his absolute power. A mighty sword thrust pierced through the monster's head, causing blood to spray. The warrior shouted proudly, warning the enemy not to underestimate humanity's strength, while a smaller monster watched in horror. The attacked monster shrieked in agony as its body was destroyed. Witnessing that terrifying power, the girl stood frozen amidst the ruins, her face showing extreme astonishment. Makia burst into happiness upon finding the girl, embraced her tightly and begged not to be abandoned again. Just as the girl was still stunned, Makia suddenly turned and cried out, "Mom!" with deep emotion. The girl, light-haired, nonchalantly explained that the boy accompanying her had fallen for her and insisted on following, which surprised the girl, dark-haired. Meanwhile, the male protagonist could only resignedly acknowledge this ironic situation. Nam Chin was startled upon hearing the report that no heart was found in the recent corpse. At the same time, a mysterious shadow entity began to take notice of the human boy carrying the Drakarch egg. The colossal monster lumbered up from the ruins, pleased to have accumulated enough life energy. It curiously gazed at the strange pair before it, suspecting one of them was the prince it sought. A towering army of stone-armored warriors appeared amidst the desolate city, pointing their spears towards the small group of people in the distance. The atmosphere became incredibly tense as they seemed to have recognized their target. Nam Chin stood amidst the battlefield, tensely speculating the location of the enemy's control core. He realized she had cleverly hidden it within any drone among this vast swarm, making the search incredibly difficult. The egg urgently announced that the only way to defeat the enemy was to destroy its power core. Hearing this, the light-haired girl and the dark-haired girl couldn't conceal their shock and apprehension. The spear-wielding monster suddenly charged forward with terrifying speed, causing the villagers to scream in panic. A massive explosion shook the entire field, signaling the start of the onslaught. An urgent voice pleaded for Makia to take her mother and everyone away, but the hero in battle armor decided to stay and obstruct the path. The woman looked at Makia with pained eyes, fearing for the life of this courageous child. The girl hastily urged everyone to flee, but Nam Chin had decided to stay behind as a decoy to buy time. That courageous act of sacrifice left the girl stunned and speechless. The blindfolded queen smiled mockingly at her opponent's benevolence, while Nam Chin firmly maintained his stance to protect humanity. He understood that if they failed now, those desperate people trudging along would surely face their demise. The monster stood defiantly, while Nam Chin crouched into a defensive stance, ready for an ultimate confrontation. Tension escalated to the extreme amidst the desolate ruins. With a sharp, determined gaze, Nam Chin looked straight ahead, ready to face the challenge. He boldly declared, "Let's do this, Ohma." Signaling an earth-shattering battle was about to begin. The monster appeared utterly stunned as it witnessed successive explosions around it. It couldn't believe its eyes at the power devastating the ruined city. The monsters were slashed apart and exploded into pieces in midair. Their pained screams were quickly swallowed by dust, smoke, and destruction. Nam Chin fought fiercely, charging left and right amidst the hideous mud monsters. He unleashed powerful attacks, determined to carve a path through the chaotic battlefield. A colossal humanoid demon hovered in the air, leading a swarm of grotesque, screaming lesser demons. The scene was like a living hell, with monsters swarming across the ruined structures. The monster couldn't believe its army was being overwhelmed by a human borrowing power from the egg. It trembled as it realized it was the power of a royal bloodline, a potential threat to King Ajido's throne. The ferocious monster declared it needed to seize Nam Chin's heart and body because their stamina had run out. Gonron was stunned, utterly terrified upon realizing he was the next target. Nam Chin felt nauseous with discomfort as he witnessed the bizarre figures trudging closer. The revulsion quickly turned into a piercing scream as horror descended right before his eyes. The one-eyed monster roared, unleashing a stream of dark energy named Black Flower Venom towards its opponent. The monster frantically raised its hands to block in desperation against the destructive power bearing down. The egg smugly exhaled a toxic breath, engulfing the city and asserting the poison would find the enemy's heart. From a distance, Nam Chin silently observed the billowing black smoke rising after the massive explosion. Amidst the swirling dust and smoke, hideous monsters appeared with loud noises, signaling approaching danger. Unexpectedly, a small, skull-shaped monster hovering in the void was violently crushed, shattering into fragments everywhere. A close-up of the monster's face showed it filled with agony, teeth clenched tight and sweat pouring down as if enduring torture. A loud thud echoed from above, forcing him to strain and let out a groan of resignation. A chaotic scene unfolded as a brutal monster tore open its opponent's chest, while another monster screamed in agony and clutched its heart. At the same time, the stitched-face monster held a withered heart, wondering why it had become so weak. The protagonist stood before the monster lying barely alive amidst the rubble, his gaze resolute yet tinged with sorrow. He clenched his fist, coldly declaring that he would release this creature from the suffering it was enduring. A monstrous hand unexpectedly emerged from the pile of debris, terrifying a smaller monster. In despair, it pleaded for its life, claiming to be the former king's son and a loyal servant of Lord Egg. The female monster strove to convince the protagonist to accept her as an ally, emphasizing that he needed soldiers to reclaim the throne. The protagonist agreed haughtily, appointing her to the position of shell polisher, despite the egg beside him showing skepticism about this trust. The egg ordered an attack, but the protagonist offered terms of peace to the zipper creature, who was trembling with fear. Amidst the violent tremors of the ground, the protagonist sighed wearily after the ceasefire agreement was accepted. The protagonist stood defiantly amidst the desolate landscape, surrounded by chaotic energy currents and shattered bricks. Ethereal beings floated nearby, coldly declared they would spare his life before gradually fading away. The protagonist's eyes widened in horror as she witnessed a gigantic hand lunging forward, destroying everything in its path. A resounding rumble filled the air, and immediately she was seized by that hand amidst the flying debris. The situation became critical as the protagonist was tightly ensnared by monstrous-eyed tentacles, unable to move. The monster laughed gleefully, mocking the naivety of those who had believed its cunning lies. Clenching its bone sword, it roared savagely, drooling with ravenous anticipation and preparing for a massacre. The monster dripped liquid, sarcastic about humanity's dreamy foolishness. From within his armor, the protagonist agreed, bitterly admitting that the very people he had saved were the clearest proof of that. A bearded man stood observing the panicked crowd fleeing through the desolate, ruined district. He remarked bitterly that just a small distraction from the boy was enough to make them abandon reason and cling to fragile hope. The horned monster shouted in rage, vowing to hunt down and savor the despair of every escapee. However, just as it finished its grand threat, it suddenly paused as something unexpected caught its attention. The giant bone monster opened its mouth, threatening to devour the prince whole, and clutched the protagonist tightly in its bony hand. While the egg was furious that its kindness had been betrayed, the protagonist could only gasp in horror as he was seized. Despite being at a disadvantage, the protagonist still boldly reiterated the warning not to underestimate humanity's strength. The resolute declaration stunned the monster, leaving it no time to react to the sudden changes unfolding around it. The two girls coordinated their attack seamlessly, one using a spear to pierce its head, while the other slashed powerfully from behind. The gigantic monster screamed in extreme agony, enduring continuous critical blows. Immediately after the impact, the woman appeared, caught the girl, laughed loudly and called her a rebellious comrade. The short-haired girl watched the scene in surprise, while the woman affectionately chided the girl for carelessly allowing herself to be easily deceived by the enemy. The protagonist clutched the sleeping egg tightly, thanking the one who had saved him, despite his body being covered in injuries. In the distance, the crowd watched silently, while a giant stone creature was also snoring peacefully nearby. The protagonist noticed the egg was drained of energy after the battle, worried because their secret hideout had been exposed. Holding the egg close, he decided that the group needed to find a new settlement immediately. When the male lead asked about the next plan, the girl immediately pointed to the sky, suggesting they seek protection from the Human Liberation Army. Hearing that name, the male lead couldn't hide his extreme shock and astonishment. The Human Liberation Army, an organization willing to do anything, even utilized the power of their adversaries. The image of a military member standing solemnly amidst the ruins showcased their iron will and formidable nature. 5 cloaked figures in black stood high above, looking down at the desolate city covered in white snow. Eldest Drakarch boldly declared that they would fight against their own kind to reclaim this world in the name of humanity. Kira worried about how the strangers would treat Ohma, but Alara reassured her that the secret bases would be safe. Suddenly, another character named Alara stepped forward, asking if they intended to continue this arduous journey. The girl embraced the male lead from behind, expressing deep gratitude for being saved and not losing someone she cherished. Unexpectedly, she lightly kissed the male lead's cheek for good luck, leaving him frozen in place from embarrassment. While the woman and the girl waved from afar, the male lead felt his body severely overheating. Clasping the strange object tightly in his hand, he silently pondered their innocence before his strength gradually dwindled. At a ruined historical site, the black-haired girl stood silently watching her companion. Beside her, the other girl smiled brightly, making excited hand gestures, concluding the story with a promise of more to come.